All right. I will call the September 27th Board of Ed meeting to order. Has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda for this evening's meeting? Questions, comments? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Wonderful. As we do at the beginning and the end of every meeting, we look for comments from the public. If there is anybody that would like to come speak to us, please come forth. Seeing none, I'd like to remind everybody that they can send emails into the Board of Ed email alias. We all get it, and we do respond. Moving on to the consent agenda, has everybody had a chance to look at that? Questions, comments? Motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful. At this point, we're going to move on to reports and recognition. Start with the board chair's report. I don't have a lot to say other than Dr. Richards and I had a wonderful breakfast last Friday morning with Mr. Brennan, our first selectman. We talked about a number of different projects that I know Karen's going to get into, but we talked about the status of the Miller-Driscoll build, about the roof at Middlebrook, the auditorium seats, which I think are close to completed at this point, the status of the bathroom renovations for both Middlebrook and also the high school. We're going to talk more about our wishes, desires, concerns, and hopeful outcome of those. He assures us that all three of these projects are moving forward and that he plans to convene a building committee sometime this fall for the Miller-Driscoll building, so we look forward to that. He further brought our attention to a small construction project that's happening out by the stadium just next to the snack bar, where he's building a outdoor exercise facility. We thought that was kind of interesting. Sounds like he's doing that with federal funds, so we're looking forward to seeing that happen. And we also discussed the status of the Yankee Gas project. There are some questions on whether or not we're going to be able to get up to Miller-Driscoll with that project, but the first and foremost priority is to get gas down the center of town and out to these schools. With that, I pass it over to you.
Thank you, sir. I was pleased to learn that the Cider Mill has been awarded a bronze medal for the award for the Healthier U.S. School Challenge. This award is for schools who have demonstrated commitment to excellence in both nutrition and physical education to promote a healthier school environment for children. So congratulations. I believe Miller-Driscoll had been a recipient last year, and it's nice to see Cider Mill. I think that a lot of us, and I certainly the parents here, could attest to the fact that I think this emphasis on healthier eating and exercise really does have an impact. And I know many of us have had kids who have really learned a lot about eating healthier and exercising. So we appreciate that. Congratulations. An announcement: each month we try to talk about some of the great work that the Schools Foundation is doing for our community and for our schools. They have a fundraiser this year that I think is very clever. Bruce and Tim and I got to hear a little bit about it, and it's they have a promo, I don't know if you've seen, it's called Have You Heard the Buzz? And that's kind of the theme of this spelling bee. It's an adult spelling bee Friday, which is Friday, November 16th, which is the night we'll be coming back from the school board's conference in nearby Mystic. But it's from 7 until the last hive is standing at the Clune Center. And Kimber Felton and a group of people have led this planning for this. The spelling bee is organized into hives, which consist of 3 members each. Hives will compete in rounds, with the winning team of each round moving forward to participate in the championship round. The hives may use an EpiPen, which is their lifeline, to help with spelling. And the caveat that teams may not use the EpiPen to win the round that advances into the championship. So trophies will be presented to the winning hive. So in the next few weeks, we will be shamelessly recruiting some of you to have I don't know if the board would like to have a team. We have some high power intellects on this board and great spellers, literacy people. So maybe we could have a team, the administrators perhaps, but it would be a lot of fun, I think. So keep that on your calendar for November 16th. Third announcement I have is that at this time each year we hear from these SAT National Merit semifinalists are recognized. We're pleased to announce that 8 students have been named National Merit semifinalists in the 2000 National Merit SAT Scholarship Qualifying Test. Nationally, about 1.5 million students took the exam, and about 1,600 were named as National Merit semifinalists. Students, it's about 1% of the U.S. seniors who have earned this status. Students in Wilton, they're going to go on to compete for merit scholarships, and our history in Wilton is that many of these semifinalists, most of them have gone on to become finalists, National Merit finalists. We congratulate Caroline Armstrong, Michelle J. Is it Singuina?
Yes.
Brian Crampton, Peter Jensen, Daniel, is it Riker? Ramamurthy Sirapuram, Paige Wallace, and Brian Way. So congratulations. I sent a note on your behalf to these young people for their outstanding work, and I know Bob and the high school people have also reached out to them, so we're very proud of their achievement. Last item I have, today I had the opportunity to attend the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents Public Policy Conference. It was at the AquaTurf in Southington. This meeting brings together superintendents from around the state and often major state officials to talk about public policy initiatives in education. Today's invited guests included Commissioner Proctor, who appeared via Skype from Minneapolis, and Governor Malloy. Just wanted to highlight some of the comments made. Commissioner Pryor outlined some of the accomplishments. He's been in office now for a year, and he talked to some of the things that he believes the State Department has achieved during this time. He pointed to improvement funding for 30 lowest performing districts in Connecticut, known as the Alliance Districts. He spoke of the Commissioner's network of districts, which are some of the very challenged districts, New Haven, Hartford, Bridgeport, and the work that is being done to try to turn these districts around. A third accomplishment he pointed to was the recruitment and work with 10 districts who are piloting new teacher evaluation systems. And a fourth achievement was the creation of a red tape commission to reduce unnecessary bureaucratic reporting. I must add an editorial comment that I have not seen evidence that is on the accomplishment phase, in my humble opinion, but I digress. In terms of emerging themes, he outlined some of the themes that are going to be the center of work and some that our people have been at work on. One is the development, as you know, of new teacher and administrator evaluation systems in the state. This is a huge undertaking. You'll hear more about this. Tim has been to workshops. CAPS has a former superintendent, Diane Ullman, who has been going around the state giving workshops. Tim attended one for the assistant soups, and tomorrow Jane and I will be attending a similar workshop at CES. I'll be speaking there in the morning to new administrators as part of a panel of superintendents. So one of the things that is really going to, and it's a huge undertaking to develop a new evaluation system. The time is very compressed, and we'll be reporting back as to what we're working on to meet a very quick timeline on it. A second initiative that we're going to be hearing more of is an attempt that the commissioner has to try and reform teacher training institutions, to really look at modules of work that are done as part of teacher training, to look at the length of internships and student teaching, to look at other kinds of qualifications to assure some consistency. We see the principals could tell you chapter and verse. Sometimes people come from some institutions that have great training in certain areas and not so much in other areas. So there's an attempt to try to make sure that there's a standard in Connecticut for institutions of higher learning that are certifying teachers. The third initiative is a proposed overhaul of the accreditation system, another big project. And a fourth initiative that you're going to hear more about is aimed at recruiting more outstanding college graduates into the teaching profession. So those were some of the things the Commissioner reported via Skype to the group today. The second person was Governor Malloy appeared, and he made reference to, some of you may have seen NBC each year does a Education Nation. It's a week where they focus on education issues. The governor was on a panel and talked about some of and there was a debate about some of the approaches he's taking in Connecticut. He spoke about his passion for reforming education in Connecticut in a way that will help us deal with a huge achievement gap that Connecticut has, which is the gap between districts like ours and districts like Bridgeport or New Haven. It's the largest gap, as you know, in the country. And there's a real concern that in urban districts, not only in Connecticut but around the country, that close to 50% of the young people don't graduate and are not going to be able to move forward in an increasingly challenging economy, and an economy that requires higher skills. He spoke about the need to continue conversations, which, as you know, have been ongoing about how we measure our effectiveness. And he said that while poverty, joblessness, crime, and other social problems are very real and have an impact on education, that it's his view that we need to persist in spite of these, and which I think is personally a very important goal, but I think it's a lot easier to say than it is to do, the reality in the street. But these are things that he's pushing for, and he's very passionate, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, about what needs to be done with education. Finally, and this is not surprising, he reported that the state cannot expect a revenue stream, an increase in the revenue stream this year. And to us, that was a signal from him that a lot of these initiatives that I outlined will not be funded by the State Department of Education. There will be, I think, some support, but probably not as much as we need. So I think that's going to it's going to be something we have to consider as we plan a budget for the coming year. Is how do we prepare for this, particularly the teacher evaluation piece, some of the training that we feel will be a part of the teacher evaluation if we're to successfully implement a new plan. So it was quite an interesting day, and I was glad I had the opportunity to hear from people and to interact with some of our peers. And I'll be reporting more out on that later on.
Thank you very much. At this point, we'll move into committee reports. Laura, do you have anything to report?
No.
Karen?
Yes. You mentioned the Middlebrook Auditorium seating, and I wanted to say in public that both the first selectman and the chair of the Council on Public Facilities have been highly complimentary of the work that our director of facilities, John Murphy, has done on this project, that he is doing it on time in the right way. The second thing that I want to talk about is, I mentioned this at the last meeting, the objectives that we as a board have for the toilet room renovations at both Middlebrook and the high school. And I'd like to get consensus on them if we can tonight. I've been working with Gary and Ken and John, and we have come up with 6 objectives for this renovation, and I'll just read them to you. First, a renovation that will serve the town for another 40 years. Second, durable construction and fixtures that will withstand the use and abuse of middle and high school students. 3, materials that will not increase the maintenance load on the Wilton Public School custodial staff. 4, eco-friendly and efficient to the extent that that's economically feasible. 5th, ADA compliant. And 6th, age-appropriate fixtures and storage for the Wilton High School preschool program. So if we can come to a consensus tonight that those are our objectives with the 30 restrooms that we're going to renovate, I will then take this back to the townwide facility steering committee, and it will probably be in the RFP that goes out to the architects. also be invited to submit an RFP.
Okay. I will ask for a motion, then a second, and then discussion on it, and then a vote. So do I have a motion to support those?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, wonderful. Any discussion on them?
No, I just want to say thank you, Karen, for your consistent work on this and keeping us all informed.
I'm
And
gonna
just
know
becoming
more
an
about
expert in
plumbing.
I know. Here to know.
Yes.
You were in charge of Bruce, now we get on the phone.
Wonderful. The only thing that I'll say is when you say age-appropriate fixtures and storage, I've seen some pictures where we literally have boards on top of stalls holding supplies above the heads, which heads and heads. You know, it's a wonderful opportunity to have things fall on whoever happens to be in there contemplating reality. So I think that's wonderful. Do I have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you, Karen.
Gil, do you have anything to report?
Yes, my committee of one has been, we will do the the review of legal services.
You're doing a great job.
Did you get to consensus?
Yes.
It was hard.
Pretty quickly. So if you have any other comments, I've heard from Chris and I've heard from Karen. If there are any other comments you have on the survey, let me know, and then we will send it out. We'll give it to Bruce, and then it can be distributed and returned, and we'll have some idea of how the group feels about our legal services by the time we have the organizational meeting.
Wonderful. And it looks like we're using the exact same process we used the last time.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Chris, Laura?
I attended the agriculture subcommittee last week. Laura, I know you're jealous on that one. I can see it on your face. For those of you not familiar with the agriculture subcommittee, which I was not, but now I know a lot, West Hill High School houses a regional ag sciences building, and it is open to students from surrounding areas, and they are by law required to have a board of directors, a set of bylaws, et cetera, and they're in the process now of coming into compliance with that, with their board, with their bylaws. So they put together a group from all regional schools. I will be representing Wilton along with Jim Hunter from the high school science department. It's real exciting, real neat stuff. They have a pet grooming department, which I thought was really neat. I don't know if they're continuing ed, but I'm looking at that. So next week is they're electing the board of directors, so I'll report back if I get elected to anything.
Only if you get grooming for your two puppies, right?
Wonderful.
Sheep shear.
Thank you. At this point, we'll move on to the, not to jump
If
off.
anybody else would like to come.
At this point, we'll move on to the year-end fiscal financial report review and discussion with Mr. Post.
Good evening. Wilton Public Schools ended the 2011-12 fiscal year with an operating deficit of $100,006. We had overages of $868,000 in contracted services, $145,000 in outplacements, $245,000 in supplies, and $312,000 in substitutes. These overages were mostly offset by savings of $482,000 in salaries and $597,000 in building operations, which was primarily heating oil and electricity as a result of the warm winter and our conservation measures that we've been taking over the years. The overage in substitutes was primarily due to an increase of sick and maternity leaves, which also contributed to our salary savings. The overage in supplies was primarily due to the textbooks and supplies needed with the adoption of the new math program last spring. The special education program ended the year with a deficit of $740,531 due to those factors. The special education contracted services costs exceeded budget by $730,000 due to unanticipated services for students and increased legal fees. And the overage in the outplacement account was the result of unbudgeted legal settlements. Our excess cost claim for the year was $1,356,850, The town received $1,013,617, which equates to a funding rate of about 75%. So after the town credits the Board of Education to the extent that we overspent our special education budget, it results in a net surplus of $640,525 in our general fund. For the year, health claims and expenses exceeded budget by $686,000. We had 5 individuals whose claims each exceeded $112,500, and those 5 individuals totaled to $805,000. And none of them reached the individual stop-loss attachment point of $225,000, however. And this compares to only 3 individuals in 2010-2011, totaling $468,000. This overage was offset by our required OPEB contribution being about $300,000 lower than budget and a drawdown of the reserve account. We're hoping that with the adoption of the high deductible health plan for the teachers, that our claims will trend lower this coming year. The balance in the medical reserve fund is now $3,815,786. The reserve is still very healthy and is funded as follows. The IBNR of $1,090,000 is at 100%, and the corridor reserve at $2,725,786 is at 84%. And this is the combined town and Board of Ed. There are no separate reserve funds. It's all we're all together. The continuing education program had a net operating surplus of $34,053. Revenues were $936,343, and expenses were $902,290. And as Dolores reported back in the spring, the increased revenues were a result of the many efforts they made to expand their programming and increase enrollment. The student activity accounts, each school maintains an account separate from the general fund. These accounts are used for all transactions related to activities that are not funded by the Board of Education operating budget. For example, at the elementary level, the account is primarily used to account for activities like field trips and fundraisers. At the middle and high school levels, the account is used for clubs, activities, and class funds. These accounts are included in the town's annual financial audit. Additionally, a member of the business office staff reviews the bank account reconciliations monthly and reviews the files annually to ensure that proper documentation is being maintained for all transactions. I'll take any questions you have.
Let's start with you, Chris.
Why was the OPEB contribution $300,000 lower?
The report that I got from the actuary had a number of different figures on it, and I budgeted for the one that happened to include the active medical claims, which was also in Ed Norgard's budget estimates. So I budgeted for the retirees' active claims twice, in effect.
Oh, okay. I also had a question about the student activity funds. The balances you quote are end of the school year,
Yes.
30. Initially, I would think that the balance would be close to zero, since they're intended to fund, parents pay for a field trip, the money goes into the pot, you pay for the field trips, so the balance should be close to zero. So especially the high school with the $367,000 balance caught my eye. But now I see that you're including in that class funds.
And some of it is timing. For example, I believe in the high school there was a large amount still left in the yearbook fund.
Oh, yearbook goes
account.
in there. Okay.
Yearbook goes in
Okay.
there. College fair, there's a large amount for that in there.
Class reunions are in there too.
Yes,
Class
there
from
are probably
class of 85. Or
there's probably at least a dozen classes that still have money in there. So some of it is just balances carried forward year to year for classes. Some of it is timing, like the yearbook and other things where they collect the money and it haven't dispersed it yet. At least as of June 30th, they had not dispersed it.
Is this about, since this was the end of June, I would imagine that it was sort of a low balance for this. And I know I personally have written several checks to get to weeks. So I imagine if the amount right now is considerably higher.
Probably not, because they probably would have paid for the yearbooks by now. And it tends not to fluctuate that much,
Okay.
actually.
I was just wondering if there was something.
They're always in the $350 to $425
$350,000
range.
sitting there if put it in the stock market.
Investment funds.
Okay, yeah, give it to the investment fund. See if they can do it. I'm done, all right.
Laura, do you have any?
I was going to ask a similar question, which
Okay.
was, does money get paid out during the summer? And the answer is
Yeah.
yes. Thank you.
Gil?
Yeah, I was wondering for contracted services, in that number, are there any ideas that we would have to, again, insource as we've done with other things?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we did include in the budget for 12-13 a .4 teacher of the hearing impaired, which was something that we were contracting out last year.
Mhm. Good.
Okay.
I have a question about the reserves.
Mhm.
The IBNR and the corridor are within the recommended
Yeah.
ranges. What was our fluctuation reserve before we drew it down to 0? Is it like 10% or something?
It's allowed to be up to 10% of the total reserve, so we could have gotten up to about $400,000, but we did not have that much in it.
Okay.
I don't recall the
My
exact
only
number.
question was about the activity funds as well, so that's already been addressed.
All right, and I had a couple of questions. One, the overrun in the healthcare cost by $686,000. Memory serves me correctly. At the beginning of the year, we thought we were trending pretty well. Was that kind of a surprise at the end?
It was, yeah. Claims at the end of the year did ramp up. We had a few bad months early in the year, and then a couple of them were a little lower. And we were always running, if you remember, through most of the year, we were running about $300,000 over in claims, but that was offset by the OPEB.
Right.
So we ended up trending up about $300,000 higher the last 2 or 3 months of the year.
Okay, and then the $640,525 that the town put back into the general fund, is that in line with what we were thinking that we were going to tell them?
I think they planned on 0, but expected to get the whole excess cost grant. So since they have to give us part of the excess cost, and then we give them back our surplus, it amounted to about what they were expecting us to give them. Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Since claims don't expire, do we often see claims coming in this year from the previous year?
Yes, you do.
Is it a large amount, small amount?
Well, that's actually what the IBNR is the incurred but not reported claims. So our
Okay,
estimate
right.
at the end of June 30th was that combined between the town and the Board of Ed, there were $1,090,000 in
Outstanding.
claims outstanding. We usually figure about, I think Ed figures about a month and a half worth of claims, roughly.
And with the high claims in the last quarter,
Mhm.
from your knowledge of those claims, are any of them likely to spill over into this operating year and cause us to be over in that healthcare account again?
I don't have knowledge of those claims. I only have a report telling me how many exceeded the limit. There is no
Okay.
diagnosis or prognosis or any other information on that.
That's good.
No other questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
At this point, we move on to the Tri-State Consortium visit update by Mr. Canty. Time for a review and discuss. How many,
Well, as promised, I'm
before you
here
get started, how many school buses do we have?
We have a number of school buses that allow 87 people to sit on board.
I missed one meeting.
Yes, that- It's a private
Falls
joke,
apart.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I had to.
I'm back in my area of expertise now. As promised, I'm here tonight to update the board on our most recent Tri-State Consortium evaluation. You have received annual updates on our progress over the last 3 years in working through the study of our English Language Arts program. As you know, the Tri-State Consortium is represented by a number of high-performing school districts in the tri-state area. And as such, the group works together as critical friends to engage the exercise of trying to improve the quality of our schools. Since we have so much in common, it takes us, I think, to the next level. So tonight, let me just take you through, very quickly, a summary of the work. Again, this is somewhat redundant. The information that I'm presenting tonight has been already presented to the board in a number of different presentations, but this does create an opportunity to bring everything together in a way that's meaningful. So the English Language Arts area has been a long-standing district priority. We decided back in early in 2009 that our next focus would be in the English language arts area. So in May of 2010, after an extensive self-study by many of our administrators and teachers, instructional leaders, Tri-State came in and did a comprehensive analysis of our English language arts program. As a result of that visit, they recommended a series of upgrades to our program. These recommendations were analyzed, and we developed responses over the last 2 years. And as is consistent with the process with Tri-State, they sent back a subcommittee of their overall visiting committee that came in 2010. They came back and visited us in 2012 on May 1st, and we had to present a follow-up of the work that we had done since the visit. The driver of the work was centered on this essential question: to what extent does the district's current approach to the teaching of reading and writing reflect an articulated K-12 curriculum that is aligned both vertically and horizontally? We had a wide-ranging steering committee. I was blessed to inherit this group in my first year as assistant superintendent. I'm not going to go through all the names, but as you can see, we had principals, other administrators, instructional leaders, and many of our reading specialists, general classroom teachers serve on this committee. And again, the level of professionalism and expertise that this committee exhibited over the years, I think, was exemplary. Just in the way of a quick review, coming out of the 2000 review, our program was already identified with a series of strengths, which you see here, ranging from our analysis of standardized testing data, the extent to which we are involved in ongoing curriculum development, our district's practice of trying to engage our students in higher level thinking, instructional design models, of emphasis on student reflection, metacognition in their work, a variety of support systems available to our students who are challenged in the area of English language arts, and of course our mandate to be active communicators to the various constituents in our school district and community about our practice. There are a series of indicators contained within the Tri-State evaluation process. There were a number of recommendations. What I have here for you tonight are the key recommendations that were made in 2010, which really provided a focus for our work. In the area of performance-based assessment, we did work extensively to try to, in effect, just try to define what a performance-based assessment looks like. You'll hear later how you can draw a distinction between a performance-based assessment and a performance-based task. They're really two different things. I mentioned the metacognition, student reflection around their work. Data, big part of the analysis, again, was identified with as a strength for us, but at the same time, the group recommended that we look for strategies to directly link the data to our curriculum instruction and to try to put in place a framework that would allow the time for our leadership teams, our instructional leaders and teachers to work collaboratively to analyze the data and make appropriate recommendations. We also looked at, just in the area of curriculum and instruction, trying to promote a shared vision and a common language. In the area of professional learning, it was recommended by the Tri-State group that we try to look differently how we utilize our content area specialists, curriculum area leaders, so that they can provide support to our teachers at the various grade levels and departments. And then, of course, the ongoing recommendation to always try to upgrade your professional development opportunities, and in this case, to really look for job-embedded work where teachers can, again, collaboratively discuss their practice within the context of their work. Indicator 6 around equitable support. This really gets into the SRBI strategy, scientific research-based interventions to support, again, students who are challenged in their learning, and to recommend interventions, define action plans to implement those interventions, and then, of course, to analyze the data. So Tri-State said you need to take a closer look at this and evolve your practice. Indicator 7, shared vision. Interestingly, we were on the front end of our strategic plan work in 2010. So the recommendation from Tri-State was to take, at that time, our 6 strands, which you've become familiar with, and try to align them with our past practice, which was to develop district priorities. I think we've come a long way in that regard when you think about things. And finally, parent community support. Make sure that we're always looking for ways to communicate our practice, whether in general or at the student-specific level. Our steering committee, over the course of these 2 years, in looking at how we responded to the recommendations, really focused on 2 general areas. We looked at our communication practices, and then we looked at curriculum and instruction and assessment. I just want to take you through very quickly some of the strategies we used to respond to the recommendations, and I think really put in place some recommended strategies to improve our work. Of course, the strategic plan, I think, really guided our work and established a framework around the response and the action plans, and very specific in the area of literacy. We've remodeled our Central Curriculum Council, and last year spent a lot of time in content-specific groups. So just within that framework, you had our K-12 English Language Arts personnel talking about our program, again, trying to build in articulation across the grade levels. And of course, you've heard in our last meeting about our vision of teaching and learning, and here we're talking about these higher level thinking skills, idea to try to promote an atmosphere where learning designs really promote 21st century skills. Another big area around communication practice was to build communication between our departments and grade levels. We tried to build dedicated time within our regular meeting schedule to focus on these important qualities of teaching and learning. And I think that paid off with improved alignment of our instruction and assessment practices. And it's most notable that a great deal of that work centered around student work and data analysis. There's been, I think, great evolution of our practice around transitions. As you know, in our district, we have this all-important grade 2 to grade 3 transition, and then the more traditional grade 5 to grade 6, 8 to the high school. So we've been embarking and following through on a number of strategies to promote conversation between the buildings and to build shared understandings of where students are coming from and where they're landing. So you've seen teachers actually visiting other schools to look at the program and practice and sharing ideas. And there's been extensive work, particularly at the K-5 level, around literacy that we think has really helped our practice. The homeschool communication piece, you've heard a lot about this through our strategic plan conversations, websites. I think we're doing a better job of communicating to our parents around those students who may be struggling in their learning. The parent portal, I think, has been wonderful to increase communication and let parents know how their students are performing in their classrooms. Work with the PTA, Matt's work with the Tech Expo, and targeted literacy information sessions that have been conducted by the schools have been helpful. Now, in the area of curriculum instruction and assessment, again, you see how this really does fall into place in terms of many things you've already heard about. You've heard us talk about the Common Core state standards and our obligation to be responsive to that. There's been extensive gap analysis in our current programs compared to what the Common Core demands. And that's really been playing out in extensive curriculum mapping across our K-12 program. The district data SRBI teamwork we've presented to the board. Last year we actually added to our data team a cohort of English language arts instructional leaders and reading specialists that we think has paid great dividends in implementing our practice around SRBI. This, as you know, involves the use of RTI Studio, that framework, a data warehouse tool, which allows us to identify and monitor interventions that we implement with our students. And then, of course, we've tried to isolate and build common understandings around shared reading interventions and evolving in our ability to identify appropriate writing interventions for students. There's been a great deal of work on the redesign of our Wilton High School reading program. As you know, we were able to increase our staffing in this program in last year's budget, so we now have 2 full-time reading specialists at the high school, which, again, I've mentioned is most unusual at the high school level. And as a result of that work, we're able to provide students with effective Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. These reading teachers are also working extensively with special education students who have reading goals. And we also coordinate what we call a general studies lab, which helps students with organizational skills and other opportunities to grow their work, perhaps across the content areas through the lens of reading. We talked about performance-based assessments before. A lot of this work has evolved just around shared understanding what the term means. And the vision of teaching and learning plays a big role in that. Metacognition, again, trying to promote opportunities to build reflective practice across grade levels and departments. And last board meeting 2 weeks ago, you heard about our extensive work in the area of professional development. A great deal of focus on literacy, the RTI Studio tool, again, the transition work, curriculum writing, the evolution of instructional site-based coaching models at our schools, and the evolution of trying to take advantage of outside experts through consultancy. Now, here's the most important part of the presentation. That, in effect, is what we presented to the Tri-State Follow-Up Committee on May 1st. We went through a review of their recommendations. We talked about how we responded. And mind you, this is basically just a 2.5-hour session. It's not an entire day opportunity where there's extensive analysis of our work. We just get some feedback. And I'd like the board to really focus in on this part of the presentation, because this is the feedback that they provided for us as a result of what we presented to them. They mentioned that it's important to think of the Common Core as the floor. And in a district like ours, despite the fact that we're increasingly becoming aware of how rigorous the Common Core is, it really should stand as a floor, and we're looking to try to promote learning opportunities that go beyond the Common Core, particularly in a district like ours, a high-performing school district. There was some sentiment and a warning sent out by the follow-up committee about being careful to see and follow the evolution of these online assessments that will be aligned with the Common Core. They recommended that we really keep an eye on that, and I guess there's some sense amongst the Tri-State group. We're all awaiting to see to what extent are these assessments really lining up with the Common Core standards. They were very impressed with our vision of teaching and learning, and as you know, this is just a conversation in its beginning stages. In this year, we're just looking to try to develop shared understandings of the concepts. So picture us back in May, just providing an overview of what last year was the work of taking the WITLs, the Information Technology Standards, and melding that together with the 21st Century Skill work that the Central Curriculum Council had done over the years. They reminded us that we have a responsibility to work on these literacy skills across the content areas, particularly with the extent to which the Common Core does focus on text complexity and nonfiction reading. And then a bit of just an organizing thought from the committee. Think about, what does the reading life of the student look like across the grade levels? What does the writing life of a student look like across the grade levels? So it was an interesting way, I hadn't quite heard that before, where you really look at the mosaic of learning opportunities that occurs across the school district, and be reflective about that practice. Just to, again, continuing with the conversation, they warned us not to drown in our data, and I'll tell you, that's really an issue right now. With all this data coming in, really focus and treasure on what you need and use it effectively. Focus on what students know and can do, which is real tri-state lingo. That's their mantra. Again, this idea of continuing to work on what truly are performance-based assessments versus tasks. Continue to emphasize problem-based learning, active participation in the classroom, our work around technology, embedded instruction, and again, this continued emphasis around metacognition. Some interesting comments about our work as instructional leaders in terms of trying to evolve our program as it relates to the empowerment of our faculty. This was unanticipated in the follow-up visit, but they talked about our obligation to continue to promote faculty voice. And interestingly, they talked about the distinction between supporting our teachers and making sure our teachers own the learning. That support, they led us to believe, could turn into resistance. And it's interesting how, in many ways, the implementation of our math program falls into this category. As you know, it came so fast. You've heard me use this language. We're trying to support our teachers. So in getting this type of feedback, I know I've morphed over into the mathematics area, it has created an opportunity to consider, well, how do you actually, to use their terms, you want to systematize, but you don't want to standardize. So how do you maintain this sense of autonomy and ownership? And particularly when we bring on board different programs. So that I thought was quite interesting. Continue to promote common learning experience. You've heard us talk about that, student voice. So in effect, in summing up the visiting committee, they noted the significant amount of work that had gone on over the 2 years, the noteworthy changes. They spoke of our K-5 literacy program, the extent to which the K-12 SRBI practice has grown and has become more consistent, just the extent to which we've improved our communication across the district and with our outside constituents, improvements in transition, and again, our ongoing work to develop assured experiences and assessments. So, as has been the case in our study of social studies and science prior, and now English language arts, this opportunity to go through this 2-year cycle, this tri-state evaluation cycle where critical friends came in, looked at our program after our self-study, gave us recommendations, formed the steering committee, tried to respond effectively to those recommendations. It really has, I think, contributed to the continuous improvement of our English language arts program here in the Wilton Public Schools. So I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
Given this really is a voluntary best practices benchmarking exercise, terms that non-educators would understand, can you give the folks at home a little background on the makeup and qualifications of this visiting committee that's giving us this feedback?
Well, probably the best way to look at the makeup of the visiting committee is just to look at our own school district. You have a range of participants across the school districts that are participating in the Tri-State Consortium. You have central office administrators, you have building level administrators, you have instructional leaders, and most importantly, the makeup of the committee includes teachers. So it really does mirror the accreditation work, where there's a wide-ranging, comprehensive group of educators who come in and, by the way, have gone through an extensive 2-day training session to be ready for this. From the area schools, they join us, and in that way, because they live it, I think they're able to look at our practice and help us grow.
I think they're from, the nice thing about it is they're from the regular accreditation through NEASC. You might have people from all over the state on a visiting team. And they may come from districts that are low-performing districts that are in the middle range performance, and some high. The nice thing about this is these are all communities that have similar records of performance. So we're pushing each other to higher levels, and I think they can. We speak the same language. Some of the same challenges we face in leading these kinds of districts and trying to become better really makes the visiting process, I think, really helpful for us, particularly helpful for us.
How many districts involved in this?
40.
So essentially we've got 40 districts coming in and auditing our program and telling us what we can improve.
Well, a representative sample.
Okay.
Dr. Richards serves on the board of directors of Tri-State, so we have that lens as well.
Safe to say that they're coming in and auditing what we're doing and telling us what we can do better.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
From, again, through their lens, which equates to the type of school district that we have compared to theirs.
It also provides, and many of the principals have come, it provides some professional development for administrators. I think one of the areas we worry about is how do we help the people who are leading our schools, our district, have opportunities for growth. And we periodically have about 3 meetings a year, and 2 of those meetings are we try to bring a team of administrators to our conversation, and they mix us up. So we could be sitting with Bronxville, we could be sitting with Great Neck North, we could be sitting with a variety of different districts and interacting over the topics that we're all dealing with, like the Common Core, like how you use data appropriately, assessment practices, and some of the best practice issues.
It's also important to note, in thinking about your question, Mr. Likely, that a number of Wilton educators are trained and travel out and serve on committees in other school districts. And to a T, consistently, they'll report what a great professional development opportunity that is for them. And they bring that work back to us as well. So it really is a two-way street.
Wonderful. Thank you. Laurie? Do you have any? Okay. Yeah.
Just wanted to, I think I've heard this, and I just wanted to make sure, in the Wilton Bulletin today, is Wilton #1 basically with Weston in terms of writing on SAT scores?
Well, I know Mr. O'Donnell's been proud to report that Wilton's first in the state in SAT performance in reading and writing.
There we go. Okay. Well, also, sort of looking on the other side, nationally, I've heard that the reading and writing scores on SATs are the lowest in quite some time. So we can see that, nationally, scores seems to be going down now. Is that because of technology? Is it because of the internet? But what I want to get at is that I think what we see is over the last 10 years, this literacy initiative really has picked it up.
Well, it's hard to equate the work that we're doing around the evolution of literacy performance in the extent to which students perform well, for example, on the SAT. We'd like to think that our K-12 preparation certainly plays out and does play an important role in the performance of our students, and we're quite proud of that. We also recognize, however, that we've been handed quite an outstanding group of students from our parent community who are quite bright and quite motivated, and that's a factor. So I just think it's important to recognize that in terms of looking at literacy, English language arts as an example, that you really need to look at a comprehensive approach to try to determine whether or not our programs are impacting performance. And one area of notable interest is the extent to which we've seen growth in our reading performance, K-8, as measured on the Connecticut Mastery Test. So you'd like to think that our emphasis on reading instruction through the tri-state process really did play a role. But at the same time, as we've reported to you, we're looking closely at our performance in writing and the extent to which, comparative to many of our DERG A schools, we could have improved our practice there. So it's a mosaic. There's many opportunities to look at our programs, and I think it's important just to recognize that there's a wide-ranging set of markers that you need to look at. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it was just listening to you talk was fine.
One of the things, I was in an English honors class this week, observing, and one of the things that impressed me was that they were talking about the advanced placement writing exams, for kids who will take the AP. And what I thought was really impressive was that they were looking at exemplar papers. Here's what a 6 paper looks like. Here's what a 5 paper looks like. And really trying to get the students to internalize some of the ways that differentiate average writing from really skilled writing. And I think that conversation and that practice with it and having students look at a paper that they had written with a set of standards that include, is there a voice to it? Some of the mechanics that kids sometimes think are not as important, the grammar, the spelling, the use of evidence to support their thesis. So it was really, I think, in a lot of the classes I've been observing, I'm seeing that at all levels. I'm seeing that conversation with kids with standards that are clear. There's nothing wrong to show kids, here's how you will be evaluated, and here's what good writing looks like. And I think that's what we're working on. We have a ways to go with the writing, as Tim said, but I think we've made some great strides.
At the same time, we're consistently pleased that our graduates report that they were well prepared in written instruction as they headed off to post-high school opportunities.
Has this significantly changed the curriculum mapping exercise?
I'm sorry?
Has it changed your view of curriculum mapping, or is it tied in with it?
I think we're working consistently to map our programs. We're way ahead in science and social studies, and now we're targeting English language arts to follow up. I think the real compelling topic of conversation around curriculum mapping is the extent to which literacy is being embedded into the content area maps. The extent to which, again, as I mentioned, text complexity and content area conversations around nonfiction reading have to be emphasized in our curriculum maps.
Laura? Chris? I only had two other questions. Does this complete the process for the English and language arts relative to the Tri-State Consortium?
Yes.
And then what's next?
What's next? I'm glad you asked that question. Our plan is actually to do something unusual in our next round. We're scheduled to be evaluated beginning in 2013, 2014, and we're going to ask the Tri-State group to come in for the first time and look at our K-12 practice across the disciplines as it relates to the vision of teaching and learning. So we're spending the first half of this year, again, trying to explore what those concepts look like, how those skills are presented in our classrooms, and then the second half of the year, we're going to start collecting evidence in anticipation of a Tri-State visit in our coming school year centered on this. So that the real opportunity here, which is going to be quite challenging for us, this is the first time we're not just focusing on one content area. This is going to involve the entire faculty and our programs as it relates to the vision. So we're very excited about that.
Wonderful. Well,
Tim, when does our next NEASC accreditation visit?
I know Principal O'Donnell's building up to the 2015
That's
visit.
what I thought it was.
We've already started.
with that, thank you for your focus on benchmarking and best practices in all these areas. And please thank the rest of your team.
Well, the credit goes to that team.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next on the agenda, we have a slew of policies to go through that will be presented by Mrs. Anderson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right. Let me get my papers organized. We have a few to go through. The first one that I would like that I've presented for you is the evaluation, termination, and non-renewal of athletic coaches. About 5 years ago, you may or may not remember that an evaluation was done of the athletic program conducted by the CIAC group, which was sort of similar to an accreditation process for the athletic program. As a result of that review, the committee submitted a report of various things for the district to look at in terms of evaluating its program. Two outcomes of that report pointed to the need to discuss leadership and expectations with the coaches, and to also create a database of coaching certification, first aid, and CPR. Both of these things have been done and are implemented, and the creation or implementation of a policy for evaluation, termination, and non-renewal of athletic coaches is an outgrowth of that. It's a policy that currently does not exist in the Wilton Public Schools. It is a policy that is highly recommended to have. It is a policy I have had the unfortunate experience of having to implement in an unfortunate situation, but it's a good policy to have. When you are faced with a situation, you want to have a steady policy in place. The policy was written by Shipman and Goodwin, the board's attorneys. The initial write-up that you received had two, and I must thank Karen for this, had two grammatical errors, and so you have the updated version in tonight's handout for you. Currently, all coaches are evaluated, and their evaluations are submitted to my office, and we keep a record of those, and we keep a copy of those, so it's not about the need to implement the evaluations. It certainly is just about the implementation of the policy. Questions, concerns, conversations?
Lori, want to start with you? Karen?
I have a question on
Sure.
the hearing procedures.
Yes.
In 3B, there can be an appeal of the superintendent's decision to the board or a committee of the board. We typically, at our organizational meeting, have delegated to an impartial hearing officer some of these hearing functions. And I'm wondering if this might be one that we would want to delegate to an impartial hearing officer.
Potentially, I would think.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't,
I'm thinking that there may be people on the board who would be hearing this that
Right.
would have children who are involved with that coach.
I don't think this would preclude us from making that determination at that time. No, would it?
No. That could be your committee of the board.
Right.
Okay.
Gil?
On the policy, I guess it's 2A2. Should that, if a decision to terminate, should that be a separate paragraph? Just
I'm sorry.
It is
now.
Oh,
What
it
you
is.
got.
This is the...
there's a revision.
Yeah, that's
oh, I see.
correct.
Oh, that's exactly right. Okay, fine.
Wonderful. Chris?
No.
Wonderful. It's on for review and discuss. I'm guessing we can put it back for the consent agenda next time around.
Will do.
Okay.
I think Jane mentioned the CX study. Again, to Likely's point earlier, the evaluation that we went through was something we did in a voluntary manner. We were not required to do that. And I really think that's a real tribute to the high school administration that they wanted to have an outside group look at our athletic program and make recommendations. And I think that it's in keeping with our approach in the tri-state. So I applaud them for their work in this area.
Wonderful. We now move on to policy and regulation 4133, travel.
Yes. This is a current policy for the Wilton Board of Education. It is a policy that I have reviewed and the Cabinet has reviewed, and there are no recommended changes at this time.
Questions?
I'm sorry, we're doing travel?
Travel now, yes.
I had a question on where it says the staff member will be reimbursed, estimated expenses must be submitted, and then the request will be returned with an approved amount shown. To me, that seemed a little outdated. To me, that said, well, if I'm going on to a conference, I need to tell you how much my gas is going to cost, and then you will approve how much I can spend, but some of those costs I just don't know until I come back. I mean, it seems to me we ought to just say, you are approved to go attend the conference, and we will reimburse you for reasonable costs incurred, as opposed to you telling me ahead of time what those costs are going to be. Or unless I'm reading this wrong.
No, I'm just trying to think how best to
Well, I'm just
respond.
wondering if we could, this just, the staff member will be reimbursed, will be approved for the travel and then reimbursed for reasonable expenses
I guess
upon
the
completion of the
question
travel.
That part of the decision-making process in allowing somebody to go is to have an estimate of how much it's
Well,
going to
how,
cost us.
exactly.
And we don't, if they estimate $1,000 or $200 or whatever it is, and it comes in, higher, we don't say, no, we're limiting you to this.
Okay.
It's just an estimate.
Okay.
Right. It's not that gas is $4.50 this week and it's $5
That's what I
next
was
week, which is
Right.
certainly
wondering.
reasonable. Unfortunately, that would not be a reason then for us to deny reimbursement for those
Perhaps
costs.
I can
Tim,
be
can I-
helpful as well. Most of these expenses are related to professional development opportunities. And of course, we're working in budget arenas at the district level and within each building. So when these requests come through, we do have to look at registration. We do have to look at related expenses. It's somewhat formulaic when it comes to mileage, for example. When you get into the other areas, our teachers, our administrators will estimate the cost. So in that way, we're really engaged in a budget exercise to try to see
Okay.
how much money is available,
Well-
and then so on and so forth.
For example, if like a hotel stay is required, do we have like standards for rates, or does a staff member have to tell us in advance?
To a large extent, our building principals, and perhaps in my role as assistant superintendent, we look at the proposal in front of us. We try to gauge the merit in terms of a reasonable cost proposal. And then you could have a teacher request to go to a week-long conference, and the magnitude of the cost would be such that we'd say to the teacher, look, we can only fund half of this. We'll cover the registration, we'll cover half of the travel-related expenses. And then the teacher may say, well, I'll cover the rest myself, and we'll go. So, and the reason for making a decision along those lines is you have typically, for example, in the high school, 120 other teachers who are trying to get into those limited funds. And quite frankly, the funds are limited.
We also know teachers who have stayed in tents, as Mr. Meehan has. What about the only
He skins raccoons and wears them on his head.
the only question that I have as head of HR, do you have any issue with not defining the term short?
No.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Any other questions, comments? Is everybody okay with that going to the consent agenda next time around? Wonderful. From there, we move on to what have we got? Student teachers.
Again, this is a current active Wilton Board of Education policy. I have reviewed it as well as the cabinet members. It is okay as is.
Start on the left this time. Questions, comments? Maureen?
On the regulation under cooperating teacher, has there ever been a cooperating teacher who has requested compensation for additional compensation for supervising a student teacher?
Due to my limited experience here in the district, I can't answer that question. Perhaps Dr. Richards might know.
The only, it may not relate to student teachers. It may be related to working with an intern through a college program. Teachers will sometimes receive a small honorarium, a stipend to support a student teacher and or intern, typically an intern, through a college-related program, and those funds are supplied by the college. In effect, they're giving a small amount of money for them to take on the intern and work with them.
Okay.
That's the only piece of compensation that I can think of through this type of experience.
Okay, I'm wondering if we needed to protect ourselves against having a cooperating teacher compensate. I'm not taking on that intern or that student teacher unless you give me a stipend.
And if that would to become an issue, then we would look at the teachers.
Gil?
How many do we have generally each year?
I'm glad you asked. This year, I was prepared. Unlike last week when you caught me off guard. This year, currently, we have 12 interns and 2 student teachers. But just today, we received an application for 2 student teachers and 1 intern for the winter semester. So they come in as kind of an ongoing basis.
Well, Chris? And how do you define reasonable number?
I'd like to, in some areas, be rather nebulous. It allows me to expand if I can, and it allows me to be controlled if I need to.
Okay. Questions, comments? Beyond that?
Just recording that answer.
Okay. Any problems with putting that on the consent agenda for the next
answer for a parent.
next meeting? Okay, you can put that on the consent agenda as well. And exemption from physical examinations or treatment, review and discuss.
Oh, yes. Okay, sorry. I moved my paper too soon. All right. There is, as I looked...
There's a typo on line 3.
Yes, and there's actually...
Pupil thing.
Yeah.
I have my sheet somewhere. Within this... there we are. Yes, so it should read, and if you have the copy that I have in front, and my apologies for not having caught this earlier. This is a current Board of Ed policy. There does need to be a change, however, due to the reflection and the change of the Connecticut state statute. It's a little unclear with all the crossouts, so I'd like to read it, if that helps. The policies of the Wilton Public Schools shall not be construed to require any student to undergo a physical or medical examination or treatment, or to be compelled to receive medical instruction if the parent or legal guardian of such student, or the student, if he/she is an emancipated minor or is 18 years of age or older, in writing, notifies the teacher or the principal or other person in charge of such on religious grounds that he or she objects on religious grounds to such physical or medical examination or treatment or medical instruction. The change that needs to be reflected is to include the emancipated minor language.
And it's only for religious grounds?
Yes.
What's the definition of medical instruction?
That would be
Is that
in health class, those kinds of content in health class.
I figured it was that because of the reference to the AIDS
Yes.
syndrome.
Mm-hmm. And that's
Any
a
other-
policy we'll be looking at in the upcoming weeks.
Any other
Which is
questions,
exciting.
comments? Any objections in putting that on the consent agenda for the next meeting?
No.
Okay.
No,
Wonderful.
I just one quick question. What if the student presents with something that could present a danger to other students if it's left untreated? You know, if he's highly contagious or...
That would be something I would speak to Barbara Shum about, and exactly how she implements that in terms of what she's allowed to do with the regulation
Well-
from the health department. But things,
I would think that there'd be another policy someplace.
So there's some health policies that would cover that.
Right.
that would be my. I would
There,
speak
you know,
to
I,
that.
one of the things that I think
Good question.
would be a good question to talk to Dr. Freilich, our medical advisor, about, because I assume there's law that governs if someone, for example, had some highly contagious deal that you could exclude them, which I think is different from receiving medical
Right.
care.
Okay.
Right.
But I believe there's statute on that. I just don't have it. in
Well,
front of me.
and for instance, if a child or even a personnel or an employee is out for an extended period of time before they're able to come back to school, they must present the doctor's note that returns them and resumes them to full activity. So we would need that kind of, we get the health exams at the beginning of the year, which would indicate to us if there was a children with some severe medical needs, which would be different than the exemption from.
But they're saying I'm religious. You know, I know I'm sick, but because of my religion, I'm not going to.
Well, they wouldn't be subject to
Seek treatment.
vaccines. It's not for us to require them to seek treatment. This is more about vaccines and exemption from instruction.
Okay.
We will look at that. We'll
Yes.
find out. Because I think that needs to be clarified. On a personal note, I had the stomach flu at the last board meeting. I begged the chairman to come to the meeting with his full-blown stomach flu, and he said, no, because you sit next to me. You may not come.
That's
So
our chairman.
I wanted to be here, but he told me I shouldn't. So.
I think we
It was
are.
unanimous.
Yeah.
It was unanimous.
Are we still comfortable putting this on the consent agenda for the next meeting?
We'll get to Dr. Freilich and get something to you about
Okay.
your question,
Thank
but
you.
I think it's...
So maybe that should go on as a review
Right,
and
yeah.
approval.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we can get that information out to the public as well.
Okay, so let's get it on as a review and approve
Right.
with the additional information. But the others can go on the consent agenda.
Can do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Sure.
No,
Just
no.
gonna
He's not
stay
going
now.
anywhere.
Yeah, she's still on the.
Well, I'm just moving on to action items.
I'm just
Look,
going to
there
stay
you are.
seated.
Attendance of non-resident students discuss and approve. You look familiar.
Oh, thank you. Just some changes from last week, or the last board meeting, I should say. There was a discussion that the board had regarding the use of the word future or regular employees and future residents or regular residents. So what we've done under regular employees is to provide a definition to more formalize what a regular employee is or who they are. They refer to all discretionary employees and employees covered under a collective bargaining agreement with the Wilton Board of Education. And we will no longer refer to them as regular residents, but as future residents.
Make me happy.
Chris, questions, comments? Laura?
Great.
Gil? Karen?
No, I'm happy.
My two were, I assume that other school districts have similar policies, that this is
Yes.
kind of a thing. And also the tuition that we do charge, is that kind of looked at each year? Is that a competitive rate, or
It's
how do
based
we
on our
determine?
It's our budgeted per pupil expenditure.
So it changes.
Okay. So every year it gets adjusted and it's,
Right. The only question that I had is, does this apply for part-time employees as well?
And I believe, yes, as long as they're covered under collective bargaining agreement, yes.
And my question then to the board would be, is that something we're comfortable with?
I would be comfortable with revisiting the entire concept. I don't know if it's covered in collective bargaining or if it's just a
It has collective
long-standing.
bargaining implications.
Does it have collective bargaining implications for every member, every regular employee, or for just classroom teachers? Or is it something that we could consider making available only to certain employees?
I'll have to get a more detailed response to that, but it does have, it becomes, over time, and we've had it here for many years, it becomes part of the employees, I don't know if you want to call it a perk. Again, we don't accept if class sizes
Right.
become,
No, I understand it's
compacted.
only if there's space.
But it does, and we've had a conversation with our council about it, and it becomes part of the understanding of what you're entitled to by virtue of working here.
And currently,
Assuming that there's space available.
right, and currently you have
You'd have to negotiate it
employees, right, and you have employees from many
Okay.
different bargaining units who are actively using this policy.
We have, what, 17 students?
So you were
16.
going to give us these.
Yep, and thank you for asking, I have those. We have 16 students, 5 at the high school, 5 at Middlebrook, 2 at Cider Mill, and 4 at Miller Driscoll.
And this year, we did not have space to allow any to enter, is that correct?
Correct, yeah, at the high school in particular. There were
district-
questions, but
Okay, district-wide, we didn't have space to add any, is that correct?
No, that is not correct. At the and kindergarten.
So all
At this
these
information,
17 were here last year as well then? There's no-
14 were here last year,
So we added 2 to kindergarten this year?
yes.
So that raises my other question about at the entry-level school. So now that we've added those 2 at kindergarten, are we obligated, even if we get tight on space, to carry them all the way through 12th grade? And is that something that we're comfortable
Unless
with?
there are disciplinary issues.
Unless there are disciplinary issues. Is that something that we're comfortable with, looking at the fact that the cost of carrying a child 12 years is substantial?
Yep.
I would just say from an HR perspective that this is a very beneficial package and opportunity for staff members, and you have many staff members or many teachers and other professionals who look for these benefits and will go to districts who provide such benefits. And there are a lot of non-cost benefits to the district as a result. If you have a teacher who's allowed to bring their child to the same workspace as they are, they're more likely to come early and stay later because they don't have childcare issues. So that's a cost benefit that you may want to look at.
If the teacher leaves during the child's tenure at school, will the child be forced to leave?
Yes,
Yes,
Or they can pay tuition for them.
right.
assuming we have space, right?
Okay, given the budget implications of this, at what level does the availability of space determination and decision get made? Because we as a board are then asked to figure out how to manage the burden of that financial cost.
When the employee makes a request, it's reviewed at that time based on current information and enrollment numbers.
And that decision, that obviously doesn't come to the board.
No.
We work with the principals to make sure that, and there have been many years where the principals have said absolutely not. We're maxed out, and we've said no. So and again, we're talking about 17 kids, and I don't know how many employees that represents. Usually it's about, maybe 10 employees. Sometimes you'll have a couple of kids, but it's not a lot of kids.
No, it's 14
that are part of
employees.
this.
Right. Is that
And you have a substantial number that will actually be exiting in the next year or two.
right? Is that decision point of whether or not space is available and not having any visibility on that something that we're comfortable with as a board? As another question point.
Visibility in terms of choosing, or visibility in knowing how many we have?
In making the determination, because it's not only a space available determination, it's a financial determination.
I don't
But it's
see
our
it as a
budget.
policy decision at that point in time.
But it has an implication on our budget.
I think it's really, we don't, I think when we look at the decisions, we're not adding an additional teacher. So when you look at what this costs to our budget, I think that the cost of this is largely whatever instructional materials they're using. There's not a huge additional cost because we're not staffing, hiring another teacher. These are spread across the K-13 grades. And so we're not saying, gee, we took one kid in third grade, so we're going to hire additional staff. So there isn't that huge a budgetary impact on us. It's relatively minor.
Am I correct that they provide their own transportation and we don't provide any
That's correct.
transportation for the
That's
students?
correct.
Mhm.
And that's a big chunk of it.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, just a quick estimate, I'd say it's $155,000 a year. Just that, if you use use tuition, if you use tuition of 17,000 times 15.
But I think what Gary
But
just
they don't
said
cost
is,
us.
They don't
but-
cost us that.
yeah,
No, I understand.
Our
but
savings
that's-
wouldn't be that.
Yeah, if we made them all leave, we wouldn't save that much money.
No, exactly.
Thoughts, comments?
I think, I mean, I don't think there's any interest in rescinding the policy or anything like that. I mean, I guess my concern was, like you said, does the board have a right or responsibility to say yay, nay to these kids as they enter? And, as Karen pointed out, that's not a policy issue. So, I guess I'm fine.
Okay.
It's a good policy. It's a very nice, and I understand, we attract the best teachers. We have to lure them.
No, that was a really important point.
Okay. Everybody else comfortable?
Yeah, we just want to make sure that when we do the discussions, the enrollment discussions, and we have, I don't remember her name.
LNS.
Yes, thank you. That we include this as part of that discussion, and that we don't, I don't remember that being highlighted at all as to the numbers then in that last time I sat through it.
I think there's so few students, I think it's negligible impact on our
Okay,
projections.
all right.
All right. Okay. So no objections to put it on consent agenda for next meeting?
No, it's
Oh, it's approved.
It's for
Can I have a
tonight.
motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Jane?
Yes.
Wonderful. Future business and agenda items. The timeline is on the district website. Looks like our next meeting is October 11th here in the professional library at 7 p.m. We're going to be discussing the 2013-14 budget assumptions. Any other, and we're also going to, I guess are we going to go first with? what's that?
We may have some policies. We're working with the cabinet and administration, so we will have some additional policy work. We want to maybe get some of the other administrators up here have an opportunity to present some policies. We've assigned several, so we will have some.
And then what about the enrollment report?
Enrollment,
Tonight's agenda.
25th.
That was in the packet.
That
It's
was-
just for
okay.
information.
yeah,
Okay.
informational.
With that, any comments from the public at this point? Seeing none, I remind folks from the public that they can email us on our Board of Ed email alias, and I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Get better.
Sounds exciting.
Is your hair still wet?